Do not adjust your digital device. What you are about to see and hear may shock and appall you. Join our hosts as they encounter countless thrills, spills, chills, and hilarity as they explore the very weirdest in pop culture. The following media is so strange, so beyond the scope of what is normal, it will make you ask the question, why does this exist? Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Why Does This Exist? I'm Chris.
And I'm Rob.
And today we are going to be talking about a legendary rapper who unfortunately is no longer with us today, and a couple of years ago had an autobiography. Well, had a biography, a regular biography written by someone else because he passed away. That was really good, and I really just wish that the man had lived long enough to read this book and to actually contribute to the book, but unfortunately that did not happen. He goes by quite a few names in his life. He was so you might know him as MF Doom, but he has also gone by Zevlov X, King Ghidorah, Victor Vaughn, Metal Fingers Doom, and Metal Face. So MF could mean a number of things, and that's the way that he wanted it to be. You would know him by his signature Dr. Doom mask that has also been embedded with different herbs and spices, and also with a ruby insignia. He is one of the greatest rappers of all time who really knew what he was doing, and he lived life like a supervillain, and nobody knew who he was. It was the greatest thing. Nobody knew what he looked like. He could go hang out, and then he could go on stage, put the mask on, and do his thing. And we will get into how far he took the supervillain persona into one of the coolest things ever. So this is MF Doom. If you don't know the show, we are Why Does This Exist? We talk about weird stuff in pop culture. Check all of our stuff out. You know where to go. It's on all the podcast networks, and you can also find our stuff on YouTube. If you're going to find it on YouTube, just engage with the damn thing. We prefer a subscription so that way we can eventually get to 500, and then we can just start making some money off of this thing on YouTube. We make a little bit on Spreaker, but every dollar helps. That's why we got to donate to the coffees and the Patreons and stuff like that. Alrighty, but that's the news. Here's the weather. You are now about to witness the true strength of street knowledge from a ragtag group of rogues. So let's get on with the goddamn show. Rob, tell the people what they want to hear.
So MF Doom is, as you said, I mean, one of the greatest rappers of all time, and I think someone who really kept it real and kept that old school hip hop sound throughout like the 2000s when a lot of rap was going in a way different direction. He really kind of kept that old school sound. And I don't know if that was because he was like a British, like because he's British, if so I feel like, artists from Britain have a little bit more, I don't know, artistic integrity, I guess, maybe, than I don't know if you could say that really, but I don't. It's interesting that he was able to keep that old school hip hop sound. Like if you listen to an MF Doom album, it's almost like you're listening to like something that Wu-Tang Clan put out in like '95.
Well, he very much idolized Wu-Tang, and also the things that they did, especially Ghostface, who had the stocking over his head for a while. Once he took the stocking off, that's when Doom decided to put the mask on, almost like a weird, almost like an interesting homage to Ghostface. That was never officially communicated between them, but they just kind of he almost, when he took the mask off, he put the mask on, kind of a thing. And they did collaborate together on a couple of different tracks later on, and there is an album that they had worked on for a while, and for whatever reason it to this day has not yet come out. So hopefully that can happen at some point where it was going to be one of Ghostface aliases Tony Stark's. So it was going to
Yeah.
be a Tony Stark's MF Doom thing. And for whatever reason, it just has not come out. So hopefully we can get it at some point in time because the stuff that they did do together that has seen the light of day is pretty friggin' awesome.
Yeah. Um, Yeah, and he has a lot of like it's cool because where Wu-Tang Clan had a lot of references obviously to kung fu movies in and like they had a lot of samples from old kung fu movies in their tracks. MF Doom has a lot of samples from like old like cartoons and Godzilla movies and that kind of thing. So, he has a lot of those like pop culture, like old pop culture references that I think are kind of lost on modern rap.
I think
Uh,
the most interesting thing about his samples is that he stuck to very specific samples
yes,
for the music that he was doing, which
yes,
was really cool. Like he had very themed samples and he wasn't just taking stuff for no reason or because he thought they were cool. He was sampling things because they had a purpose in what he was doing, which I I don't know if that's I can't say that every rapper has done that. I feel like a lot of times it's just, oh, this sounds really cool. Like Wu-Tang obviously themed it too to the kung fu stuff,
yeah,
but I think there's a lot. I think a lot of samples you just kind of hear random things, but this was very purposeful according to his projects. Like for
yeah,
all the Doom stuff, he used specifically Super Friends stuff and
yes,
old cartoons and um and um Marvel related cartoon samples from back in the day, usually the ones that included Doctor Doom in the episodes.
yeah,
And but they also were in line with the type of with the song that he was doing, with the tracks that he was putting down. They made sense to the flow of what he was doing, and he integrated them in a really interesting way. The
yeah,
Godzilla stuff ends up coming into the Monster Island stuff,
yeah,
which he did as King Ghidorah, which only has one album at this point. The Doom
yeah,
stuff he also would put in for Victor Vaughn because that was a play on Victor Von Doom.
yes,
But King Ghidorah was specifically the Godzilla stuff and the Monster Island crew that he was doing things with. King Ghidorah only has the one album, Take Me to Your Leader, but I think it had something to do with his record contract. And the second album just I I forget if he recorded things and it never saw the light of day or if he just used the beats on something else. I think it might be the latter,
yeah.
but he
Um,
didn't end up doing that. And for Danger Mouse, which
yeah, I was
is
gonna say the Mouse and the Mask.
my favorite stuff that he did was was the Danger Doom stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
and because it uses a bunch of samples from like various Adult Swim shows,
yes,
including Aqua Teen Hunger Force. There's a song that features Master Shake, um, and then also Space Ghost Coast to Coast, and it was a really cool. And actually, I remember watching Adult Swim in the 2000s, seeing it advertised because it was like a big collaboration for them back then. And I think Adult Swim actually produced the album, if I
they
remember correctly.
they did. So he actually did a lot of voiceover stuff for Adult Swim.
Yeah.
So in turn, that kind of helped. They kind of helped each other
Hmm.
in that relationship where he just said, "Hey, I'm open to doing a bunch more like VO stuff. This is really cool. Um, do you guys want to help me put out the next album? This would be a fun collaboration. We could help each other out." And Adult Swim was kind of a fledgling at that point, so
Yes.
they so he they just said, "Yeah, sure, let's do it, man. This is awesome."
That was what a lot of people say is the classic era of Adult Swim, where really the staple, like original, like cornerstone shows were popular, like Aqua Teen Hunger Force, Space Ghost Coast to Coast, The Brack Show, uh, Robot Chicken came around that time. So that was like the golden era of Adult Swim, you could say.
Mm.
And they did a lot of these musical collaborations during that time, like with MF Doom and Danger Mouse. And they also had, and it was funny because like back then I didn't really care because I wasn't into hip hop back then, really. You know, I was into more rock and metal. So I was like, ah, whatever. Like I just like didn't care about it. But like now looking back, it's like, damn, I wish I had known how good it was, you know, when I was like a teenager, because like I was like one of those teenagers like, oh, all rap sucks. It's all the same, because I was just used to listening to the shitty commercial rap. You know, I wasn't hearing like Wu-Tang Clan and MF Doom and, you know, uh Biggie and all that. It was only like the fucking shitty commercial rap about like, you know, being in the club drinking Cristal and stuff. It wasn't like all this like, you know, these songs that actually were saying something. It wasn't, you know, besides like, oh look, I'm in the club, I got a bitch on my arm and we're drinking fucking alcohol. Like, so it was and that sucks because and you know, there's like obviously there's conspiracy theories that like there was some kind of chicanery there with fucking the CIA purposely like steering rap in that direction to make it less of a, you know, philosophical kind of like street philosopher kind of genre, and more into like just a bullshit like, oh look, we're gonna fucking go out and drink and, you know, and promote that culture, instead of actually like, oh, look at what's going on around you and talk about it, you know.
Hmm.
um
That I haven't heard that, but that actually could that's got
yeah,
some legs to it. I also wonder if some of the commercial singles that rappers were doing at the time were almost like a tongue-in-cheek jab at that, because I could see like Party and Bullshit being something being almost just like, yeah, this is what they want you to think that this is about.
yeah. Well, and it's also so like, I'm gonna put on my fucking tinfoil hat for a second here. There's a big there's a big like theory that USAID was funding like commercial rap like
Huh.
on purpose, because they wanted to kind of promote this like bullshit like, you know, stupid culture of just like, oh, go out and drink and do drugs and be shitty to women and all that. And, you know, now that USAID, a lot of the funding got cut, it all of a sudden rap is no longer the number one music in the country. You know, rap for the longest time was like always at the top of the Billboard charts, and now all of a sudden it's not. And it like just coincidentally happened at the same time that US aid got cut.
No, that's
So
weird. I hadn't
yeah,
noticed that, but I mean, I also don't really listen to any commercial radio or anything,
yeah, neither do I really.
so I'm not really the guy to ask on that stuff, but I have noticed that it's skewing more. I've noticed in the last few years it's been skewing more toward country.
Yeah, yes, big time. And you got to kind of wonder, and you know,
Even
obviously
even
the music
pop,
industry kind of
even
well,
pop
yes.
music has gone in a country direction too. And
And this has
that's
been
probably
like,
not a coincidence.
it's been the truth for a long time in the music industry that the studio moguls and, you know, the producers latch on to one specific genre that they think is going to make them the most money, and they pump at like, they'll friggin' pump so much money into it and like make the shittiest songs just so they could like, you know, make a buck before the trend dies. And you know, that's been for years in music. Like you could like so much so that there's clear like trends in by decade. You know, like 70s was disco, and the 80s was hair metal, and the 90s like there was like grunge and like also hip hop, like especially gangster rap. Like it's like there's like these very specific trends that are very much driven by the studio producers that are trying to make money. um and I think a big part of what set MF Doom aside from hip hop, especially at the time, is the fact that he was so different, and he was during the time where, you know, hip hop was in that phase of like, oh, it's going to be like this mindless, stupid crap about just being in the club and drinking alcohol and all that. Like he was actually like doing like that old school, like, you know, writing songs about his life, writing songs about his like growing up where he grew up, writing songs about stuff that he liked, enjoyed growing up, like cartoons and you know, obviously Doctor Doom, Marvel villains and all that. And that really set MF Doom apart from what was popular at the time that he was coming up and making albums.
Even his flow was very different because
Yes.
he didn't have a he didn't do some he wasn't projecting his voice. He didn't have some kind of like tough guy gimmick going on. He spoke he did it almost more of spoken word. Like it was very
Yes.
monotone, like he was just talking to you. And over just some really cool beats that he also, for the most part, produced himself. So it took years for him to release a lot of things because he worked so long and so diligently on them. But he also wasn't the
Yes.
type of guy who you couldn't he couldn't just be creative at all times. You kind of had to wait for his creativity to show up. But then when he went to the room or he went to the studio, he was working for like 48 hours straight, 72
Yeah.
hours straight. And he put together all the stuff. And then he, once the juices were dry, he kind of needed to recharge for a while. So it
Yeah.
took a while to get things out, but he also was able to bend the world to his will. And it's really interesting how he was able to do that because he was a great negotiator, and he just found ways to get exactly what he wanted in terms of either monetary gain, and if he didn't see the money that he was asking, then he would kind of just take his beats and he'd shop them out to other people or other albums or stuff like
Yeah.
that. So he was always getting paid no matter what. And the beautiful thing was, of course, the mask. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody knew who he was talking to. And you know, he also had the flexibility of being underground enough for such a long time where a lot of his earlier album artwork was taken directly from Marvel comic panels, which he
Yes.
never asked for permission.
Yeah.
He just took it and he used it and they released it. And I guess he figured, you know what, if they're gonna sue me, then we'll deal with it later. But right now, this is what I'm doing because this works with my blueprint, and
Yeah.
this is what I'm trying to present. And eventually Marvel caught wind of this and they sent the cease and desist, and they've since just changed the artwork to just drawings, which I think he might have done himself, some of them,
Yeah.
of just art of him doing the same pose that Doom was, so it becomes parody or something like that. So
Hmm.
really, really cool stuff there. Eventually we'll get to the Doombot era, but we might have to go back to the beginning a little bit. So he grew he was born in London. Early in his childhood, he moved over to Long Beach, New York, and he came he was originally performing as the trio KMD as Zevlov X, which is actually a I want to say anagram, I think anagram for X evolves, which ties into more Malcolm X. So almost to say that he was the second coming of Malcolm X in a way,
Yeah.
or at least philosophically. But he was in the group KMD, which was stood for causing much damage, also known as a positive cause in a much damaged society. So they worked together for a few years, almost a decade actually, 87 and 94. They were on Electro Records, and one of the other members of the group was his brother, Dingaliz. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. Dingalizwa Dumil. Daniel Dumil is Doom, but his brother Subrok was
Yes.
one of the was one of the two main members of KMD. The third being Onyx, the Birthstone kid, who replaced the first one, Jade One. Jade One would eventually be known as Rodan in Doom's Monster Island project,
Hmm.
where it was they all just took pseudonyms as different Godzilla villains, but we're not there yet. And they ended up releasing two albums, which they ended up releasing two albums and they were signed to Elektra Records. The first was Mr. Hood, which took a lot of samples from Sesame Street, especially on the tracks Who Knows Me and Hum Rush. And the second album that they had was called Black Bastards, which Black Bastards they were ready to like Elektra Records was ready to release the album, and then the artwork came out, and the artwork is it's pretty controversial artwork, especially for a label owned by especially for a label owned by a bunch of like white executives, where it's basically it's a caricature of a Sambo being hung, and during a game of Hangman, where the letter A was the only letter that the person didn't get. So almost like a real life game of Hangman, some Squid Games type shit, basically. And Elektra saw the record album, they saw the artwork, and they also were not fond of the name for obvious reasons. And they just said, we can't put this out. So we're glad that you recorded this, but we're just going to give you money to just buy you out so that we can shelve this. And they ended up not putting it out. Now, part of this was the artwork, but the main driver was there was another album that came out around the same time by somebody else. I forget exactly who, but they were going to put this album out, and whatever the other album is, what that artwork was very controversial, and the album just caused so much controversy amongst the hip hop music community that Elektra just looked at this and they just said, we need to change the artwork. And KMD didn't budge, so they said, we can't do anything with this, then we're not going to put it out. And they just wanted to get ahead of it, so they got skittish and they got scared, so they chose to shelve this. Years later, Doom would release this on Ready Rock, his Metal Face label, and Subverse, and each iteration would have some kind of tribute to Subrock, sorry if I'm not pronouncing this correctly. He passed away unfortunately in 1993 while he was trying to cross the Nassau Expressway, and he got hit by a car. He may have been under the influences of a couple of things, but Doom always believed that there was something else going on, but it was never investigated. So he thought he might have made an enemy, or he might have been running from somebody, and that's why he tried to cross the expressway the way that he did. Like, he was running across the expressway and he got hit by a car and died. So Doom always believed that there was something else that was going on, but because it was never investigated, we'll never really know.
Yeah.
So so they had just finished the album, but he passed away, and then a little bit after, they disbanded, and Zev Love X, aka Doom, he stayed away from hip hop for about 4 or 5 years until 97, when he reemerged as Doom. And that is where that ends, which, I can't imagine what that's like. I have a brother. I know you have a brother.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what it's like to lose a sibling so young. I get when you get older and
especially
things just kind of take their natural course, but when you're like a kid, I can't imagine what that's like.
And, especially if you suspect that there was some kind of foul play and, was never looked into, basically.
Yeah.
It's not good. I'm sure that affected Doom a lot.
I'm sure. And I mean, years later, towards the end of his life, there was also another thing too, because he lost one of his children. He lost, I think, his eldest son.
Yeah.
At the age of 17. So very close to that. I think in 2017, he lost his oldest son, and that's something that I can't imagine what that's like. And I hope that none of us ever experience something like that. But so, and then of course, which I think created other things that had contributed to his untimely death in 2020. But we'll get to that too. But MF Doom, basically, he never stopped creating after that period. Once he started as MF Doom, and he had his plan together, and he had this whole, the whole concept of what he was doing, nothing was going to stop him. And I think he also was comfortable knowing that it was only ever going to get so big. And I think
Yeah.
he took comfort in that too. He was a complicated guy, and I'm sure a lot of it stems from losing his brother and never having the full closure.
Yeah. No, yeah, definitely. And I think the fact that he didn't think he was gonna, I mean, that kind of, I think, lends credence to his integrity as an artist. The fact that he really didn't necessarily care about making it big and like selling himself out to make like something that would have been more popular and would have been, you know, um, what the trend in hip hop was at the time.
Right. He was
He
always going to
really
be counterculture no matter what.
exactly. Uh, Also the fact that like his beats especially really have that like lo-fi old school feel. And I think we talked about this a little bit when we did NWA and when we did Wu-Tang Clan about the difference between the East Coast and the West Coast rap in terms of like beats and production. And East Coast, MF Doom really fits into that East Coast sound again, probably because he grew up in Queens, even though he's from England. Um, uh, the East Coast sound of being it like very lo-fi, low key, almost like jazz, like
Long Beach
soundtrack.
he grew up on Long Island.
Yeah. Oh, Long Island. All right, Long Island. So, but yet, whatever. Anyway, East Coast New York rap. Like Wu
Yes.
Tang Clan had the same thing. The lo-fi beats with like almost jazzy kind of music production in there that like is very like low key and quiet, whereas the West Coast was like big bass and lots of synthesizer and stuff like that.
Yep. A lot of
um
party beats.
yes, exactly. uh the East Coast is way more like subdued and kind of more, I want to say, more artistic a little bit, not to
I
disparage
think
like West
so.
Coast.
I think so. I mean, we talked about this with Wu-Tang when like East Coast is a
Yes,
little more cinematic in structure.
yes, yes, yeah, 100%.
And we have yet to speak about the Dirty South and the Midwest styles of hip hop, which have their own interesting brands too. But
And
I
it's
think
interesting because it's almost like a combination between the two, like the Midwest. Like if you listen to like Ghetto Boys or something like that.
I was listening to Ghetto Boys yesterday.
Yeah, Ghetto Boys really has that, like, it's like almost like a combination between the West Coast and the East Coast sound.
Yeah,
And
it's got
they're
like
of course from
it's
Texas,
got the
so
I'd say they got the East Coast they have the East Coast flow, style, and lyrical themes, but they have
yes.
the West Coast party sound.
Yes.
So it's a weird it's a really weird little crossover where I
Yeah.
think if you get to like Chicago and the Midwest, it almost there's there's some kind of there's a shift there. It's
Mhm.
similar, but there's a shift there where even if it is it's almost the inverse where you get more of the lo-fi with the party lyrics, but it also can get pretty real too,
Yeah.
especially if you go to like Chicago rap.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because I think Chicago and Detroit also takes a bit of that Motown sound and pumps that in there too.
Yeah.
So
Which makes sense
you get
for
some
the
really
area.
cool and interesting things. And like also in the South, you get a little bit of a country influence in there too. Not too much, but you get a touch of it.
Yeah. So yeah, but MF Doom like has that, like we said, that East Coast kind of lo-fi beat sound, and I think it really works well. See, I like that low key lo-fi sound, and his flow like just works with that kind of sound so good. And then of course like the samples from like when he did the Adult Swim samples and stuff, and or like does these cartoon references, it like really has this like nostalgic feel for me. Like Wu-Tang Clan kind of does. It just reminds me of like growing up as a kid in the 90s, and the kind of media that we had, and so that's like a really big plus for me, for MF Doom. But yeah, so I don't know. I think he's really just like stands out as one of those rappers that did his own thing and didn't like fall into the mainstream bullshit that I think a lot of rappers did. There are some that kind of like stood out that became like huge and like the top of the game, but like didn't have to sell out their souls necessarily. Like Eminem, I think, is a good example of that. Where like he pretty much kept to his roots, but still like became like this huge phenomenon.
I would say Mos Def too, to a degree. I think Mos Def kind of straddled the line between mainstream and underground,
Yeah,
but he also took some pretty good. He took quite a bit of influence from Doom too,
yeah,
and like Mos Def, I think is one of my favorite rappers. He's done a lot of really interesting stuff because he tends to experiment a lot in his beats. So
yeah.
you don't really get any. You get some very you get some really different jazzy stuff going on in
Hmm.
there, which I really appreciate that he does that. But I think, but uh, but but Mos Def went a little bit more into acting for a
Yeah,
bit. I'm not sure how much he still does right now. I haven't really seen him in a lot of things, but I haven't been super following him for a while. But he's tended to kind of straddle. He's tended to be in the middle of between mainstream and underground, and I think he's got like a really cool medium there.
yeah,
And I'd like to think that a lot of the Wu-Tang guys have also been, for the most part, pretty low key because they lend them. I think the difference between a lot of the mainstream rappers and a lot of the underground rappers is the underground rappers tend to lend themselves to a lot more projects on the producer side of things.
yes. I was gonna say that. Like RZA does a lot of production. He does a lot of like soundtrack stuff for movies and TV shows. And I think that's where really he probably makes most of his money. Like, not to say that he doesn't make money from Wu-Tang Clan, but I think RZA's really his bread and butter is producing.
I could definitely see that, especially scoring.
Yeah.
I'm sure he gets paid a ton to do scores.
Yeah. And he talked about that a little bit when he was on Joe Rogan a while ago. This was like a couple of years ago now at this point. Um but he does a lot more production work and like scoring and stuff like that now. And that's
I
really
mean,
where he that's his like main gig, whereas Wu-Tang Clan, he's still, I think they still do Wu-Tang Clan. Obviously they did that album that they only pressed one copy of.
they do.
um
They're touring. They're actually touring in September. I wanted to talk to you about that
oh
because
shit.
yeah, they're doing a day at they're doing PNC.
Oh really? Damn.
Yeah. So but we'll talk more about that like off of
off,
mic.
off mic.
Yeah, off mic. But yeah, there was a day in September that I wanted to I wanted to propose to you.
All
Um,
right.
so we'll see about that. But yeah, getting back to MF Doom, he he produced a ton of different he produced a lot of work on the side, and he was just always in the studio a lot. I
Yeah.
mean, but he later he later like his stage shows were super interesting as well. So when he early on when he had been performing, he would do all kinds of like crazy staged things that nobody really knew whether or not what was going on was real. Like he played into kayfabe a lot, just to like tie a pro wrestling perspective to things like that. Where there was one show where it was barely promoted and it was announced maybe like 3 days before the show that it was that MF Doom was doing a show because he liked to make his in the earlier days he liked to make his appearances very sporadic and he
Yeah.
also announced them very very on very short notice, but the house would be packed and not really, and which very few artists can do, like Tool being one of the other ones that they could just announce that they're doing something like day of and it'll
Oh
sell
yeah.
out.
Yeah.
So he liked to be sporadic with those appearances. And during this time, he had another rapper come out. I want to say it was MF Grimm or Ben Grimm,
Hmm.
who he came he came out and they had a big fight on stage, like a physical fight on stage, and it was madness, and he lost his shoe, and people came running out of the place because they thought that there was going to be a whole like schmoz and everything. And I think he made that to get out of some kind of he made it to get out of something in the contract or something like that. He would he also had a thing where he would try to see what he could get away with, and we'll get into this in a minute. And that, that coincides with the getting the world to just bend to his will, also being a supervillain that he is in concept.
Yeah.
He stages fake fight. Everybody goes running out of the place. They're like, "Oh my god, it was so crazy," and whatever. And and then maybe he came, and I don't know if he came back and did more stuff. I think that was the way that it ended. And come to find out, years later, that the fake fight was totally that the fight was totally staged, and he had gotten the idea from a conversation with like the promoter or something like that, where he was like, well, only in like the event of a fight or something. And the promoter thought that he staged the fight after this, but it turned out that he had staged the fight long before he even had that conversation with the promoter. So he was working everybody, but he would do crazy things like that. And this ties into the Doombot thing where he, he also had a very signature appearance to his look. Now, while he could just hang out without the mask, and then when it was time to go on stage, he could put the mask on and walk through the crowd, and they would be like, "Oh shit, MF Doom is in the crowd." Then, but nobody would even know who he was when he was just chilling in the back.
Yeah.
Which was really cool, and I always appreciated and respected that anonymity, because
Yeah.
that's more or less something that I would like to do if I ever became a famous person. Not that I'm not that I not that that's my goal ever, but that's also one of the reasons why we don't use our last names for this show. That's also why we don't why we don't do video, is
Yes.
because we really want to keep, like, if this ever turned into a big thing, I don't want to have to walk up and down the street needing a bodyguard or having people recognize me. I don't There's no need for that.
Yeah.
I like my life private, and I want to keep it that way. And Doom also did. The Doombot thing came around where, like, he had, like, despite having the mask, he did have a signature appearance on stage with his beer belly, which
Hmm.
he liked to drink, he liked to party a little bit, he liked to do some other stuff, which I think was also part of just, coping with life and not having his brother around anymore, and a lot of other things that probably happened to him. He also had some health issues as a result of that, like diabetes. He was also a smoker, and he didn't really take care of himself, like health wise. So he had some signature things in his look. He also had donned the mask because he was losing his hair a bit. So he also, that way no one could ever see him as an older guy and think he's just like, oh, it's some older like rapper guy. Like, why do I want to see this guy who's past his prime or anything? The mask keeps a youthful appearance because nobody really knows what he looks like.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
the mask also provided these other areas where, when he started really blowing up, people wanted to do more tours and do more appearances and things. And that wasn't really something that he really wanted to do. He also wanted to make sure that he could give them the best performance every time. So, and he might not have always really been able to do that. So, but also he wanted to take advantage of every offer that he had.
Hmm.
So he was like, well, I can't really be in two places. He might have been having a conversation with somebody who might have been like, well, you can't really be in two places at the same time. And then a light bulb went off, and he also was like, maybe I can. So enter the Doom bots, which again, taken from Doctor Doom, taken from the inspiration of Doctor Doom, which the mask also had taken inspiration from Doctor Doom, not just in appearance, but he also had it fitted with special herbs and spices, which in comic, Doctor Doom had his mask embedded with special herbs and spices and gems so that way they could protect him from from like supernatural stuff.
Yeah.
And so he even did that. And he also had an albums called Special Herbs and Spices, where this is another part of the songwriting that I thought was really cool, and the ingenious part of his albums, that they had concepts that they stuck to in both lyrical content, the artistic direction, but also and in sampling, but also in the song titles. So in Special Herbs and Spices, all of the song titles are named after special herbs and spices. In Food, which is my favorite MF Doom album, it's all food, except for the final track, which is Vomit Spit, which, what happens if you've eaten too much food? All the kids got to get out of the pool. So just really wild and fascinating stuff. But the Doombot thing, Dr. Doom has just a mechanized army of robots that look like him that he sends out to do his nefarious deeds for him. So they're robotic henchmen that look like him, so that it seems like he could be everywhere at once, while just being in the comfort of his own stronghold. MF Doom decides, I can be in two places at once. I'm going to do this. So he would make up these, he would say, oh, I'm under the weather. I would bring in an understudy basically, or I'm here physically. I can't perform. Let's do this. Or, oh yeah, I'll be on stage in a minute. Don't talk to me. Don't come to my dressing room. Right. He would send out another rapper in the mask to perform his tracks. Sometimes it would, this, of course, caused controversy, and people have been pretty split on whether this was genius or they got ripped off, which that's in the eye of the beholder. Because a lot of people, they never really know if they saw MF Doom. They paid money to see MF Doom, but they don't know if they actually saw him perform.
Yeah.
You could only really distinguish him after a while. You could only really distinguish him from earlier appearances and possibly some photos, but some photos were he even put a Doombot in for the photo shoot. So it still kept people guessing, right? So, and he wouldn't even try, it wasn't even like they tried to get someone who was identical in size and shape. They just got whatever rapper he respected and was like, yo, I want you to go perform my stuff for me as MF Doom. And, I'll pay you out for this. Here's your cut of the performance or whatever. And he would take his cut of it too. So it was super ingenious, but I totally understand both sides of the argument.
Yeah.
He even performed at MDF one year, Maryland Death Fest, which is
really
just an extreme. Yeah.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I forget what year. It might have been 2019 or 2018, somewhere between 2018 and 2019, somewhere between 2016 and 2019. He performed night one on the underground stage, and it was barely, people didn't find out until a couple of days before that he was going to be at, the smaller underground stage on night one. I think it was the Thursday show or something. And people were like, holy shit, MF Doom is going to be here. So fuck yeah.
That's
And
hilarious.
I don't know if they have had another rapper on before or since,
Not that I
but
know of. I mean, it's
really
pretty
cool.
mostly extreme metal bands usually.
Yeah. But again, this speaks to the level of underground that Doom was, where he could do that and people wouldn't bat an eye. So really fucking cool shit. But nobody really knows if they actually saw Doom after a certain point, which
Yeah,
I think is really interesting. Now, part of why he did that is up for debate. I'd like to believe that a good part of that was because he had mounting health issues over the years,
yeah,
and he wanted to make sure that he couldn't really keep a touring schedule. But another part could be he was a homebody and he wanted to make as much money as he could.
yeah.
So
That's
he
true.
wanted to, which again, I'm not going to say that he's wrong for that. I do feel bad that the fans who got upset about this got cheated in some way, but it also is really interesting because you don't know who you actually saw. So you could have seen a really big name performing MF Doom. And another cool thing that could be done with with his estate was managed by his wife, um, his wife Jasmine. They could potentially still send out Doombots
Yeah,
and perform his MF Doom stuff as a tribute, and they could
yeah. Kind of like how they
have
did with
little
like Death to All. Uh,
right,
Almost.
r-
Yeah, I could see that.
right. Like they could do that, and
They might
I don't.
not, just out of respect for him, if they don't want like, because who knows what his final wishes were, if he wanted that, or if he wanted to like just take it to the grave with him.
Right. I mean, only only the estate and his and the lawyers who are tasked with handling the affairs of the estate know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
But it would be interesting if if they did. But I feel like if that was on the table, or then they would have been doing it by now. But he has also just had other collaborations with various companies, and actually, his early collaboration with, I want to say it was either Nike or Puma. They did an MF Doom shoe, and it was in very rare print and rare supply, which now it didn't really make like the sales weren't crazy at the time, but now the sneakerheads, that's one of the rarer shoes, so you could see that for a few $1,000s a pair of those, especially if you got the box. It's probably 10,000 or
Yeah.
higher. So you've got those, and there's a couple of other collaborative shoes that he's done over the years. He did one with Wallabies, which I think Ghostface has also done. That was a lot of the shoes that you would find around like the projects, because they were just like cheap $15 shoes
Mhm.
that, you know, that's what you could afford. So to give back, Ghostface did, and I don't know if the other members of Wu-Tang Clan have done it either, but I'm sure a lot of other rappers have also done collaborations with Wallabies to give back to the community and like keep the prices low on those shoes so that people could afford and enjoy them. But he did some other cool stuff, and I think Puma designed a speaker system for him
The shoe
just
company.
he used. Yeah, the shoe company.
Huh, that's interesting.
Like I guess the guy that he was working with who designed the shoe also did other really interesting fabrications. So they gave him a custom speaker that he adored.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So really, really interesting things with MF Doom. Now he was a complicated guy. He had 5 kids. He wasn't the greatest husband. He had children from a few different women, but his rock was Jasmine. He did have a second place where he did have a second apartment where he just wanted to have affairs and I guess do his work or whatever, which, if that's your thing, whatever. There was I'm not going to pretend to understand where the guy's head was. I'm sure, if I lost my kid brother, like at a young age, there would be a lot of stuff that I wouldn't be able to really process ever or get over, especially if they were especially if it was tied if I believe that, like we said, that there was something else going on that
Yeah.
wasn't kosher.
Yeah.
um I'd have a lot of I'd have a lot of unprocessed grief that I wouldn't know what to do with, which, like we said, he had drinking problems. He liked to smoke. He liked to like work with other substances and stuff like that. So like I know he's a cocaine user. And of course, smoke weed, which honestly you kind of need to just deal with life in general.
Yeah.
Um, so throughout how, despite all of his faults, the guy was a freaking genius.
Yeah.
It's not excusing the behavior, but
Well,
complexities and artists go hand in hand.
and yeah, exactly. And you look at like other artists, other musicians and stuff. And I feel like if the guy all he did was like some coke or whatever, like not to say that it like condone doing coke, you should probably not do that, but like or just smoked weed or whatever, there are like fucking music artists that have done way worse,
Oh
so
yeah, of course.
it's like whatever, it's the guy
Yeah,
obviously had some demons because of the trauma that he had in life, so if he wasn't hurting anybody else, like whatever, like, it's not that big of a deal, but
right. I mean, well, in terms of the affairs thing, he's obviously hurting his wife, but
yes.
but I don't know what the arrangement was. If she
Yeah,
was just like,
exactly. They might have had
whatever,
some kind of
fine.
arrangement where it's like, don't ask, don't tell kind of policy or something. Who knows,
Yeah,
and
which I think with a lot of musicians or people who are on the road or anything,
yeah.
there is like a don't ask, don't tell policy. Like, I wouldn't say it's common, but I think
Oh,
you would,
I'm
I'm sure
sure
it's,
than you would know. And I think it's just because, again, like you said, being long hours on the road away from your family. I mean, like wrestlers have gone through this, musicians go through this shit all the time. Especially, I think musicians where if you're a popular musician and you're playing on the road like 180, 200 days a year, and like beautiful women are throwing themselves at you, it's like not that I'm condoning it, but like it's understandable that like there would be I think that's why really being like a touring musician or like a touring like a pro wrestler or something, it's really not like it's not the type of career you're gonna have if you want to settle down and have a family, because you will not see your family basically. And you know it's
yeah,
it's definitely a single man's game. That's for
yeah,
sure.
it's just very difficult to do. Like it's a young man's game. It's a single man's game. If you and if you are able to hold a relationship together and to have a family and everything, then you know that's incredible. And
Yeah, more power to you, and
you
that's
know,
a really strong relationship at that point, I think, obviously.
yeah, I mean, I I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how those dynamic works, but that's that's somebody else's problem. That's not that's
Yeah.
so I'm not gonna try to pretend, and I'm sure everybody's got their own way that they do things.
Mhm.
But I also feel like, sometimes if you really want to keep it together, you might have to like slow down at times where like you might have to go on the road a little bit less and find other ways to make money.
Yeah.
And if you're a rapper, I think it's easier because you're just one guy. Like if you're a rapper or a comedian or something, or you know, there like it's easy to do that. Or if you're a high paid actor, you've already made your money at some point. So
Yeah.
you're not really like you could take on like when you get to a certain point, if you've succeeded in a way, you can take on a lighter schedule, but there's a lot of sacrifice that's going to go into that stuff for years. So,
Yes.
you know, it's one of those things where if you have decided to do this, then you really have to understand what it really means to go into it. I think, and it's, the older you are when this thing, when this stuff happens for you, it's going to be a lot harder to figure out how to get that done, because sometimes, you might even need to take your family on the road with you to make sure that, to keep yourself in line.
Yeah.
And that it's everybody's situation is unique in this business. So how they're able, like how they handle it is how they handle it.
Yeah.
But to get back to Doom, I don't know, what's your take on the Doom bot thing? Do you like?
I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it. I think if it's if the artist has passed away, like the like Death to All, and you're just trying to bring like a live performance of that artist, I feel doing something like that is more acceptable than say like doing like the hologram thing that they were doing for a while.
I would hate the. I don't think the holograms are respectful at all. I
No,
hate the
I think
holograms.
yeah,
I'm glad they
but
stopped.
having someone like a live performer do a tribute to that artist by doing like performing their songs live, I think that's definitely acceptable. There are certain bands, Kiss, that have basically rumored that like a lot of the appearances they do, it's not really them, it's just a bunch of guys dressed up as them. In that kind of situation, especially when the band is still alive and touring, but they're having like guys dress up as them just to do appearances because they don't want to actually be there. I don't know. It's a little that's a little less, acceptable, I think. But MF Doom was one guy, and when he was doing it when he was alive, like I get it, like he's trying to like, you know, get as many appearances as possible, and he only could be in one place at once. So, but at the same time, I feel like you're kind of like cheating your fans a little bit when you do that. So I don't know. It's hard to like. It's a very complicated issue. Uh, but again, doing it after he passed away as like a tribute and like so that people can still hear his music and see how it was performed by him when he was alive, but with like an artist that's like doing, his music, I think that's a lot more acceptable. And
I
I
mean,
think that,
also if you got in touch with his, like if they were able to use some of the people that were Doom bots for him, then I think I think you could get away with that too.
oh yeah,
Um, so like I guess if you called it a tribute to Doom or MF Doom as the Doom, or like the Doom bots present MF Doom or something like that, or just
or
MF Doom bot.
Doom to
I,
all,
yeah,
like death to all.
I think if you called it like MF Doombot, then people would be like, okay, cool, I get what it is. Like if you bill it a certain way, then I think it could work. Um in life as he was doing it, I don't know. I thought it was genius. I thought it was a really interesting thing. Now I get like, and I totally understand why people would be pissed. I'm not entirely sure. Like I think a part of me would be annoyed that I didn't really see him, but I think if I didn't notice it at the like during the show, like I think if I noticed it during the show, I would be like, "Oh, well, what the fuck? Then who is this guy? Like, where's my money?" Then I could see, like, I could see that. If I figured it out in the moment, I might be a little peeved.
Yeah,
But if I found out years later, I don't know. A part of me might be a little bit grateful for that, and because I would just that one, because I'd be looking at it from years later where I would be like, "Whoa, so who did I see?" And then like the speculation can almost be more fun.
yeah,
But I guess it really depends on how obvious it was at the time. I mean, obviously, I never experienced MF Doom, so I like live, so I can't say for
yeah,
sure. But I think it would have been, I don't know, I think like I could see both sides of it. I think looking at it from this lens of just knowing that he did it and it already have his time having passed, I can appreciate it. I think it's cool and I like it because it fits with the Doom. It fits with Doctor Doom and the MF Doom character.
yes,
It adds to the lore and the persona of the supervillain that he
yeah,
was trying, the supervillain gimmick that he was portraying as MF Doom, because it's kind of messed up, but at the same time, a supervillain would do something like this.
That's true.
So, in terms of the concept, in terms of the overall big picture of the concept of MF Doom and the supervillainy, the mad villainy, it fits. It makes sense. And it's almost like you could be mad at him, but also just in that context, only one guy could really get away with something like that, and it's him.
Yeah.
And I mean, just to add a little bit more to the to Daniel Dumil being a complicated fellow before, nobody has had a bad word to say about him. So that also adds to the character. And I mean, again, that goes back to, if you're doing all these things and you're not hurting anyone, then how bad is it really?
Yeah.
You
That's
know?
true.
So, he wasn't known for any destructive behavior or anything like that. He was from all accounts, it seems like he was a pretty stand-up guy.
Yeah. Yeah, well said.
So, I don't know. I guess now we go to 2017, he passed away. They had 5. He married Jasmine from well, he's married his wife Jasmine. They had 5, like,
He
he had
passed away in
5 children.
2020.
He passed away in 2020. Their son Malachi died
Oh, yeah.
in 2017 at age 14, which,
Yeah.
god damn, how do you fucking come back from that? I don't even know.
Yeah.
Unspecified causes, so it could have just been some kind of hereditary heart condition. I don't know, but he passed away. But MF Doom unfortunately passed away almost fittingly on Halloween of
Yeah.
2020. So in an already fucked up and terrible year for everyone, we lose
Yeah.
Doom, and it was not announced until December 31st. So people didn't even know until New Year's Eve that he had died 2 months ago. He died in London because he had difficulty, even though he had moved to New York and lived in the United States all of his life, and I think he had even traveled back and forth to Brazil at various points to work on albums. He was never a naturalized citizen, and he always had difficulty getting in and out of the country for whatever reason. He always had trouble with his citizenship status in America, despite having lived here for many, many years. And at one point he eventually just moved to London for a while. And he had crashed with this other British rapper that I believe he collaborated with for, about 10 weeks. They just hung out, drank, and just, did whatever and performed music. And he even had showed up to punk shows asking them to sign, like, he bought posters from this punk band in one of the in the book. I recently read the biography. It is called the oh my god, why can't I remember the name of the book now? The Chronicles of Doom. That's what it's called. Really great book. Check this thing out. It's really fucking awesome. One of the better musical books that I've read in a long time.
Yeah.
He was at this punk show in Leeds, and he bought a poster from the band, and the band, he was like, "Hey, can you sign this?" And they said, "Yeah, who do we make it out to?" And he said, "MF Doom." And they were like, "Wait, what? Get the fuck out of here."
That's hilarious.
So, like, really, really cool shit. And that's a story that they'll have forever.
It's almost as good as our friends opening for Afro Man.
Yeah. I gotta call that guy, actually. Not Afro Man. I'm not that cool. I'm not that cool.
Afro Man. Yo, Afro
No,
Man, what's up, man?
No, I'm not that cool. I gotta call little Zetro and see
Yeah.
how he's been all these years. Um, but yeah, he always had trouble with that, and then he just like at some like he even got a British passport to go to do a European tour. He couldn't re-enter the United States, so and he was out of the states for like 2 years, and then eventually in 2012, he just called Jasmine and was like, "Hey, just take the kids and move to London. Fuck the USA."
Hmm.
So he lived in Yorkshire, and then and then he was in Leeds for the time of death. He They even say that he had property in the Virgin Islands, and he would just go back and forth to the Caribbean, but it's never been clear whether or not that was true. But
Yeah.
he unfortunately had a lot of health problems, and part of it was complications from long COVID, but other parts of it these were other lingering health issues for years. Like I believe he was a diabetic,
Yes.
um, and
He had high blood pressure.
he had high blood pressure. He had kidney disease.
Yeah.
He was a smoker. He had some substance issues. Well, I
Yeah.
don't know
So
if they were.
2020
He had a
being,
lot of things going on, and
all the
this did not help.
comorbidities that were listed with COVID, he had basically.
Yeah, and his official cause of death was angioedema, which is an area of which it's
Swelling.
swelling in the layers of the skin,
Yeah.
and the swelling could occur in the face and tongue,
Yeah.
which could restrict his blood flow, along with long COVID issues where he already has trouble breathing to begin with.
Yeah, well, with the comorbidities he had and the fact that he had COVID, there's very likely that he had like permanent heart damage from COVID, and it probably caused like congestive heart failure, which led to the edema.
Well,
Most
yeah,
likely is probably what happened.
well, the angioedema was a side effect of blood pressure medication that he had recently been prescribed. So
Yeah,
had he not taken had he not have been subscribed to that blood pressure medicine, I'm not sure how much longer he would have stuck around. I mean, maybe it would have bought him a couple more years or even 6 months. We don't really know. But the hospital had also, they had also not, he'd also had not been like taken care of properly at his stay in the hospital. And
yes,
the hospital had issued an apology statement that we did not give Daniel Dumoulin, MF Doom, the 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 best care, and he died under our watch, and we could have prevented his death, but we did not. We were unable to. So it is very unfortunate that that's what ended up happening, and we'll never, you know, we'll never really know how much more he would have been able to do. But it's really unfortunate. We didn't even know his cause of death until 2023, which was around the same time that the book came out. So like it really sucks because they didn't get the best care. They could have done something about it. Maybe they could have treated him and he would have been okay, and they would have switched his blood pressure medication and everything would have been fine, or at
yeah,
least better for the time being. And it's just really unfortunate that he went the way that he did, especially after several very harsh years
yeah,
where, was estranged from his family for 2 years because of government issues and like just basically citizenship issues, and you know like and then losing his son a few years after that, and then a few years after, 3 years after his son passes away, he went too, and just he suffered through a lot of hardship in his life too,
yeah,
which I wonder if that's also what helped. I wonder if like Doom and the inspiration for Doctor Doom, for MF Doom and all of the Fantastic Four comic books and Marvel and his love for cartoons. I wonder if a lot of this project came as a result of a coping mechanism from dealing with the loss of his brother, Subrak.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the best artists have some kind of adversity that they had to overcome in life. I think it's what drives them to be successful in music or whatever. So I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, it's just really unfortunate that this ended up happening.
Yeah,
But yeah, some of the issues were resulting to his treatment. His wife, Jasmine, has said that his nurse call button was placed out of reach and that the hospital staff did not check on him frequently,
yeah.
which one problem leads to the other. If he's trying to get that call button, and look, if the hospital should be checking in on this guy frequently, even though they don't know who he really is, they should be checking in on every patient
Yeah.
frequently. I'm sure the hospitals were understaffed because it was also during COVID. So like his wife couldn't even visit him until the day of his death. So no one was really able to check in on him. They didn't know what was really going on. So he even could have been dead for a while, and they might not have known until they checked his bedpan in the morning. Um, he, but just like during COVID, they like hospitals were just at their absolute worst. You couldn't even like it's really hard because you blame the hospital, but also at the same time, the whole world was in such a panic and hospitals were just overfilled where
Mm,
and understaffed where like I think the issue has more to do with that year and just COVID and the lockdown restrictions and everything going on at the time, especially in the UK where restrictions were a lot tighter. And like really, I mean, almost every other country besides America, the restrictions were much tighter. And
yeah.
some countries were able to keep things under control. Like I think Canada and the the Scandinavian countries were able to
Well,
keep things very low, but
Sweden didn't,
also they were
but Sweden also had no restrictions at all. Sweden sent the kids back to school. They were like, "No, we're gonna, this is it's keeping people locked up is not going to help the situation." And Sweden actually had really good outcomes. So
well, Sweden also had a much smaller population density than a lot of
yes,
other areas too.
yeah,
So it was a little bit more it was a little bit more self-contained already, just because people were not living on top of each other for the most part.
hmm,
So I think environment plays a lot into that factor too.
yeah,
But I digress. I think it has more. I think his death has more. I think his death and the complications surrounding the hospital have more to do with just the landscape of chaos that was the COVID-19 pandemic than the hospital's care. I'm not saying the hospital gets a pass. They should have been more diligent about this and they should have been doing what they needed to do. He also um he also like he had a swollen throat, which was a symptom of angioedema, and it took them 2 hours to medicate that. So he could have like his throat could have swelled up again, and
yeah,
that could have been what caused the issue. And if he couldn't hit the call button and no one was coming to check on him, that's probably what made the difference. And also, the hospital didn't detail their plans, and they believed that his health had improved where it didn't. So they really fucked this up.
yeah,
So I want to say that a lot of that weighs in on is a result of what happened with COVID in general, but
hmm,
also the hospital themselves should have been doing a better job of this. They really
yeah,
fucked this up.
yeah,
So it sucks that we lost him this way, but
yeah,
he left behind such an incredible legacy that that's going to live on forever.
yeah. Yeah, and like again, that's the one thing that an artist always does is they leave their art behind so it could still be enjoyed, and it's kind of like a way for them to live forever.
Exactly. But what an incredible guy. The crazy thing is he didn't release a ton of solo work. Like as MF Doom, he only recorded Operation Doomsday and Food. He was just known as Doom on Born Like This. Take Me to Your Leader was King Ghidorah. Vaudeville Villain was Victor Vaughn. And VV2 was also Victor Vaughn. So he only did like 6 solo albums, but he also released a lot of instrumental albums, which were the Special Herbs, volumes 2 through 10, 2 through 0. And a lot of his other work were collaborations, like Mad Villainy, which I think was one of his best albums is Mad Villainy. Special Herbs and Spices Volume 1 with MF Grimm, The Mouse and the Mask, which is the Danger Doom stuff, which is my favorite. Key to the Cuffs, Neruvian Doom, Sarface meets Metal Face, and Super What. And then he also did the KMD albums, Mr. Hood, Black Bastards, and he only did the one Monster Island SARS album, which was Escape from Monster Island. So left behind a huge body of work, and just cemented a really interesting and really cool legacy.
Yeah.
He will greatly be missed, but never forgotten. The true supervillain of rap, MF Doom.
Yeah.
Anything else you got to add to this?
Nope. I think that's about it.
Alrighty. Well, thank you everybody for sticking around and checking us out. Go listen to MF Doom.
Yeah.
Go check out all of his stuff. Watch his music videos. Do all the interesting things. And, just enjoy MF Doom.
Yeah.
Like, just get it. If you don't know who he is, get into it now. We hope you learned something. Just do your thing and have a great time. The name of the book is called The Chronicles of Doom, Unraveling Rap's Mask Iconoclast by S.H. Fernando Jr. Pick that shit up today and have a excellent evening.
Yes.
This has been Why Does This Exist? I've been Chris.
And I've been Rob.
And remember, question everything.